So now that we know how to use the turtle with Python, let's go ahead and create a new program to do something a little more artistic. So we're going to call this a square spiral. And essentially, we're just going to import our turtle module. And then we're going to create a new turtle, call it Tommy. All right. So when I run this, we have our screen over here. And essentially, we want to draw what it looks like a square. So this will be a square, sort of. But we want to draw a square where each length of the next side is going to get a little bit longer. I'll get a little bit longer, and then longer, and then longer, and longer, and longer. So it starts to create this spiral effect. So we can do this by hand first. So let's try that. Essentially, we say Tommy, go forward, and then we'll do 20, and then Tommy left 90, and Tommy forward 25, and Tommy left 90, and then Tommy forward 30. Let's see if we can do at least 5 sides. Tommy forward 35, Tommy left 90, Tommy forward 40, and then Tommy left. So let's see what this is starting to look like. I'm going to run that. So it's getting there, but you saw that it took a lot of typing, and we don't get really impressive results either, right? So we can actually start with 5, and then 10, and then 15. So you see what it looks like when it was starting from 25. Let's do a couple more. We do 25, 30, 35, 40. All right. So this should start showing the effect that we're looking for. All right. So this is what we're looking for, right? So we need to draw a square, but every time we turn, the next line is going to be a little bit longer, and we can decide how much longer it's going to be. In this case, we're doing by 5, so we can play with that a little bit. We have the one line, the next line, the next line, the next line. So the trick is like every single side, it's going to be just slightly longer by a fixed amount. That way, it's going to look symmetric. Not like my hand drawing here. But you get the idea. Okay, so obviously, if we were to do this by hand, it's a lot of work. If I wanted to change instead of by 5, I want to change by 2. So I start at 2 and 4 and 6 and 8 and then down 10, 12. I like to do this because then you start appreciating the value of the functions and statements that you get in Python. So this is one. So this one's starting to look nicer, but obviously it's a lot of work for us to continue to do that by hand. Okay. So now we know what the concept is. So essentially, we have something that is increasing by a certain number. So we need to determine what the number is. So if we start at 2, we need to get it longer. So there's going to be an increment in here. Is there an increment? So let me show you how to do that. We're going to use the what's called the range function. So I already showed you range. So let's look at the documentation for Python for range. And then you can always find this. So these are the built-in functions. I told you there's about 30 of them. The one that we're looking for, so we're using its range, right? So we go to R here, we got a range, and then we have the information that we're looking for. So rather than being a function, it's actually an immutable sequence type. So that's an interesting one. So once you understand what the data types are, then you know what that means. So essentially, it looks like a function, but it's going to give you it's a specific data type, which means that that you're going to get a list, right? In Python, they call that sequence types. So there's built-in types. So the sequence type is the list, tuple, or range. So the range is the one that we're looking for, and it's similar to a list. So for loops work with list with the sequence data types. So we'll explain what those are as we go through the class here. All right, so we're going to get rid of all this. We don't need that. And then we're going to use the range function. So like I told you, the options for range are you need to at least specify one argument, as you can see here. So range, if I put 5, it's going to give me this is a specific data type from 0 to 5. Okay. Now the number on the right, it's ignore. Sorry, it's not ignore, but it's going to be the upper limit minus 1. So because we start at 0, we need to have 5 elements on that range, and it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So I can demonstrate that by saying, what if we print range 0 to 5? We get that. So one way to get it out is you can say for I in range 5, I print I, and then you can see that it printed 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so we've printed here in the console, we have range for I in range 5 means that it's going to come up with this data type, range type, and it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you see that the 5 is not there. But if you count this, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So there's 5 elements here. So the way the for loop works is that it's going to go through whatever you provide here. So you provide a list, and then every time it goes through, so it's going to count, and then it's going to insert that into I, and then we can print the value of I. So that's essentially what we're doing here with the with I. We just getting the value from here into here, which is what we're seeing over here. And then we see the next one, and we see the next one, and we see the next one, and so on. Okay. So we can use range to count up to a particular number. So there's a few options for range. So range, we have range with one number. That's essentially starting from 0. We have range from, we can change the 0 to something else. So we can start at 10. If we want to count from 10 to 20, in reality it's 10 to 19, then it's range 10, 20. And you can also provide a range step. So you can say, let's count from 1 to 100, and then you provide a step. So you go in, count by 5s. So that gives you a range of 1 to 100, counting by 5s. So essentially, this is going to give you, 1 and 2. So this will give you 1, and then so you'll get 1, and then you get, what would you get? So you get 5. So you get 1, then you get 5, you get 10, and so on. And we can write a loop here to say for I in range. So let's test all these out. We have from 10 to 20. Let's print what I is and how many is it going to print. So we think it's going to be from 10 to 19. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? So there's 10 numbers between those two. But notice that 20 is not included, so always keep that in mind with range. Then we can also do print. So we print that again. It's 10 through 19. Very good. And then, so the other option that we can do is we can have a step in here. So we can say step 5. So now it's going to go from 10, and then it's going to be an increment of 5. So it'll be 10, 15, and then let's see what else it gets to. So only 10 and 15 because 20 is not included. So if you wanted to get the 20 included in there, you will essentially go 21 or something larger, and then you get 10, 15, and 20. So range is a very useful function, basically for loops. So in our case here, so we know we want to go from for you can use whatever I in range. Let's try to do 20 sides, right? Now, if I do this, then we tried this before. So essentially, it's going to draw a square of side length 2 over and over and over again. So that's just drawing a square. We knew that. That's basically running the drawing the square. So we need to change. So our code says we need to increase side length on each iteration. So every time that we go through here, we need to increase the number. Now we know that range counts already for us, and we know that I has the current number from the range as it goes through the whole range. So we can just use I, and let's see what happens. So you start to see how it's increasing the size of the spiral. Very cool. If you look really closely, it's starting to look a little bit of a 3D effect. It looks like a pyramid from the top. So that is range 100. So it's 100 lines, and then step in by 1, right? So let's say we wanted to step by 2. What happens if we add 2 to the number here? So let's think about it. So you start at 0. That's 2, the first one. The next one is 1, so that's 3. The next one is 2, so that's 4. So essentially, we haven't changed anything other than the starting point, and we shifted it by 1. So we're going to get a very similar result. I think it's the same. It's just that the center has a little more space there. Right, so that's not what we want. So what we want to do is we want to increase the counter here. So let's go from 0 to 100, and then let's step by 5. There you go. So now you're starting to see the power of using a for loop. When we tried to do this by hand, it was a lot of typing, a lot of repetition. Now very quickly, so this is not long enough. All I can do is I can do 500, and then it's just going to continue to draw that for us. And we know how to speed this up, so we can say Tommy speed, and then we'll continue with fastest like we had yesterday, the class before. So now it's starting to draw. So this is getting interesting. So I can say maybe 600. Let's see how big the screen is. So let's say if it's 800 times. Okay, so that fills out the screen nicely. Default screen, yeah. 800 by 800. And then I can make it as tight as I want. I like this. This is a nice one. This is a nice pattern. It's starting to grow on you. What happens if we change this to right? Same thing, it's just spinning the other way, obviously. So this is a square spiral. And we can make it as tight as we want. What happens if we do floats in the range? So you kind of use decimals, so you always have to use integers in between the steps. So 1 is a default. This one makes it tighter. That's very cool. And then something interesting, what if we change the angle slightly? So if I do 92, so that means that every time it turns, it's going to do 92. So it's going to go a couple more degrees every single time. So it's going to continue rotating because it's going to add. When you're doing 90, you're staying in place. When you increase the angle, you're starting to rotate. And this is making some really nice designs now. So that's pretty cool because we had a square spiral, but now we're using the square to draw what it appears to be, spiral, the more circular spiral. So 92 is a pretty cool one. You can go 88, so you got 2 below, and then it basically is just going to spin the other way around because we're subtracting 2 from the 90 instead of that. But it should look very similar to the 92. And then you can start doing interesting shapes. So 135, if you experiment with this a little bit, you'll see that these are going to be some cool stars. Some of them will yield nothing interesting. So maybe 178. I think this is sort of a interesting one as well. And then it's gonna be so like 180, for instance, is it just go back and forth. Sorry, yeah, it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So if you think about it, then if you say, okay, what if I do 181, right? So then it goes slightly starting from the back and forth, and I start drawing this really cool shape. And 179, obviously, it's the same thing, but it's in the other way around. And what else can we do? So let's see. So you can just plug in some random numbers. And you get some spirals with triangles, essentially, or sort of so 240. Remember, 120 was our triangle. So 240 is going to be a triangle as well. Oh, 72. We know that's like a pentagon. So you can draw the polygon that you want. So let's do 360 divided by let's do a square. That's the one that we started with. So that's a square spiral. Then you can do a pentagon or a hex. Let's do an octagon. So that's an octagon spiral. And you can just change it by, you can add like a couple degrees to that. Then it's going to start spinning around, making it into a rose. If you change it too much, this one still looks good. Okay. So yeah, and then obviously as you start looking more like a circle, then there's not going to be much of a difference. But you can start to see that, the power of this, right? So all you have to do is find a shape, add a few degrees to it, and then you're getting some pretty cool spiral. All right, um, so let's learn a little bit about lists. So lists, we talked about range being a sequence. So let's go back to our documentation in Python. And then there's something called a list. Basically, what I want you to learn here is that list is a mutable sequence type. So forget mutable for now. Let's focus on sequence type. And it's documented in list and sequence type list tuple range. So let's see what the documentation tells us about. So there's built-in types. This means that Python already defines the data for you, right? What the data should look like. There's something called a list, and then something inside the list, or essentially what comes out of the list is something called an iterable. And the iterable allows you to just go through it, right? Iterate. So the first iteration, the second, then third, and so on. This tells you what kind of like the technical definition of what it should look like. But I think if we go to the list tuple range here, so these are all sequence. So a sequence, you want to think something like like just a sequence of items, right? So a list is sort of the best definition of that. So if you have a sequence, essentially the way it looks like is, I think we'll just go back to list. And so a list is essentially uses square brackets to define it. And then you separate the items with commas. So this is a list with one item in it, A, and this is a list with multiple items in it. So to define a list, I just put the brackets, and then that's it. And then to add values to the list, I can just separate my commas. So if I want to have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so that's the list, I can then iterate through this list. So I'm going to put that in my numbers list. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I look at what's inside numbers, it gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I want to get a specific item out of the list, so if you think about of a list, kind of like a um, backpack or something with access to it. So let's say I want to get this number here, the fourth. So you need to look at the index. So by index, what we mean it's the position of the of each element. So this first one has its own index. Then the second one, then the third one, they will have a number. So you can refer to these just in particular ways, right? So how do we get them out? Let's find out. We have 5, 4, 3, 0. So essentially, all I need to do is I need to say numbers, and then I give it an index number. So 0 is the first one, so that's 1. And then if we count over here, this is 0. This is 0. This is 2, 3. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is confusing. So if I say number 4, it gives me the last. So remember, we're starting to count at 0. And that is what we do with the index. All right, so so that's a list. It's essentially something in square brackets, and we can put names here. So we can say, let's say fruits. So I'm going to create a variable called fruits. And then let me close this. We'll talk about this later. So then I can put kiwi in here, put a banana, I can put a apple. So if I have fruits, I can say, okay, what's the first fruit on the list? It's a kiwi. Should use the correct name. So the first one is a kiwi, and what's the last one? Let's say I go only one index number when too many. So then it says list index out of range. So that's what that error message will mean. I can find out how long the list is by saying, hey, how many fruits are in there? It says 3. So what if I do fruits 3? Does that work? So that's out of range. Remember, we start counting at 3. So as I start counting at 0. So if the length of fruits is 3, so 0, 1, 2, the last one is actually 2. So you can do length minus 1, which is 2. All right, so let's say we want to use a list to make this a little bit more fun. So let's go back to our square. Let's make sure this still works. Okay, so that's a little nice little rows. And then we're not going to change the angle. It's going to do a regular square spiral. Cool. But I want to specify colors. So I'm going to do a list with colors, right? So a square. And here I can use the turtle colors. You can find them. I think trinket.io colors has a nice, this one, trinket.io colors. Let me bookmark this as well. So this one, I can just go through here and then essentially you can just pick the sort of the standard one. So you can type blue. So let's pick 4 colors for now. So let's do something like contrast. So let's do like a blue. Let's do like a green. What green should we pick? So we're going to do blue. We're going to do lime green. Okay, so I'm going to start blue, lime green, and 2 more. So here we're going to find, let's do like a red or orange and a yellow. Well, yellow might not look very good on the white background. So let's do so we have blue, green, and then maybe this orange over here, which is dark orange. And next, let's do some medium slate blue, or do a red, straight red. Okay, so let's do red. All right, so we have this four random colors that we pick, and essentially we want to go through the list over here, right? This is going to be a little bit more complicated to do, but I'll show you how to do it. So everything is black right now. I need to change the color every single time. So one way to do it will be to say, okay, so let's print what I is in here. We know that it goes. So if you look here on the background here, it's printing what I is every single time. It's going to go all the way up to 800, and then it'll stop. Okay, so stop at 799 because we start at 0, right? So 800, and but we want to somehow go through these colors. Now we can do, just pick the first value and so on. There's a nice little trick that you can do with Python, with any programming language essentially. There's an operator called the modules operator. So if you do this, gives you the remainder of the division. So we know that 24 divided by 4 is 6, and there's no remainder. So if I do 24 modules 4, gives me 0 for a remainder, right? So there's none. However, 24 divided by 3, it's 8.0. Again, 24 modules 3 is 0 again. So if you divide 5 by 2, then there's a decimal part here to the number. So 5 modules 2 is going to give you what's left. You have 1, then when you divide by 2, it's going to be 0.5. So that's the remainder. So with the modulo operator or the mod operator, we can figure out which a multiple of these 4, right? So I can say, so let's say I have 4 colors, and I'm on iteration. So the for loop is going to give you an iteration from in range 10. So I am going to print I. So it's going to print I. Then I can also print, with the space. Let me do this again. I'm going to add just, let's say I divided by 4, right? So this will give me the numbers that are divisible by 4 in this range. So it gives you the first number, so 0, and then essentially it gives you, if you see an integer here, then it's going to be divisible by 4. So 0 divided by 0, 4, and then 8. So these are the ones. Everything else has a decimal component to it. So we know that we have 4 numbers here, and then we want to figure out, okay, which ones are going to be the 0, the 1, the 2, and the 3, right? So let's see what happens when we increase this number to. So let's change this to modulus and see what that is. Divided by 5, and then let's do another one. So let's do I comma, well, sorry, modulo 4. You see something interesting here. So it says 0, and then it gives you a 1, it gives you 2, it gives you a 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. So the remainder is interesting because the remainder is going to give you a counter, and it's going to count between 0 and 3, which is 4. So by using this modulo strip with the number of that we want, in this case 4, right? Then I can remove that here. Okay, so I can remove that into that. So now I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's fine. The 0, 1, 2, 3 work. But then when we start at 4 again, then we reset to 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is a nice way to find what's inside the list. Just 4 items at a time. So it resets every time there is a multiple of 4. So when it goes to 4, it's divisible by 4, so it starts at 0. And then when it gets to 8, it's divisible by 4, so it starts at 0 again. So we can use that to pick the color that we're looking for without going to index out of range. So instead of printing here, I am going to set the color. So Tommy color, let's do it by hand again first. So we're going to do the blue. So now we have a blue spiral. Good. That's what we're looking for. And but instead of blue, I want to pick from the list. So if I do colors, I need to tell which item from the list I want to pick. And we know that we can use this modulus function to figure out 0, 1, 2, 3. So now every single line is going to be one of the colors on our spiral. Very cool. And just to finish this off, we can do a little tricks over here, and we can start drawing some cool shapes with colorful. So this one looks a little bit nicer now. Now we add color, and you can just change it back to. If you want to do the triangles, let's see what this looks like in color. So part of the turtle here is there's a screen part of it. So there's a turtle screen, and you can change the control, the color, right? So how do you do that? So when you do your turtle, you can actually do just the screen, and then you look for that one screen, and screen BG color, black, let's see, do a dark theme. There you go. So you can have a different contrast in different colors, maybe. So that's one, and then you can play around with the different shapes that we had. We wanted to do 8. It looks like a rose or a flower. This looks really nice. Full screen and enjoy it. So not bad, huh? So now with a little bit of Python, again, only 10, 15 lines of code in something really impressive to show your friend. Let's add this. Let's make it a little bit tighter. That crosses over. And then one of the ones that I like is the so when we did the 180. So this is like the sort of a circle. So that one is pretty cool. So it's you go from a square spiral. You can still see the spiral in the center. You go from a square spiral to something like this, or you can just straight up to like one of those numbers that you found that you like. 125, and one of the ones that I like are around 135 as well. So like little stars. All right, very cool. So I'll let you experiment with it. That's what coding is all about. It's trial and error, and like again, using Turtle allows you to see your creations, and it's a powerful way to understand your code.